that anger, that frustration over not having a say in Parliament leads to a conflict, leads to a war. Who can tell me what war that leads to? Where the colonists are not happy since they don't have any representatives, it leads to a war, a big war. What war is it? It's a war that was on your assignment. It's a war that you were supposed to have learned in elementary school. There's even a Schoolhouse Rock about it. Yes, Margot. No, Civil War means we fight amongst ourselves. We weren't fighting ourselves. Well, we've already talked about the French and Indian War. Remember? That's already happened. That was 1754, 1763. Oh, come on. Logan. The Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War is a result of the colonists being angry about not having any representation in Parliament. It wasn't about the taxes, it was all about the representation. It wasn't because they had a tax on tea and so they had the Tea Party to boycott taxes. No. They didn't want to pay the tax on tea because they had no representatives to voice their own opinion in Parliament. Okay, the Revolutionary War. It starts on an April morning in 1775. April 19th, 1775. Troops start marching on April 18th, the night of April 18th. Here's where you get lanterns up in the church tower. One if by land, two if by sea, which way the British troops are coming. And then you got a guy who jumps on a horse and rides around the countryside crying out. Anybody know what he's crying out across the countryside as he's riding through the night? He's also riding with somebody else, going across the landscape of Massachusetts, crying out, "The British are coming! The British are coming!" And where is the first battle of the Revolutionary War? It's on your assignment. It's also the topic of a Schoolhouse Rock video. Nobody knows. It's also the name of a street in St. Paul. Starts with an L. That would be Lexington. The first shots were fired in Lexington. The first shots were fired in Lexington, but nobody knows who fired first. Basically, what you get is the following. I need 3 volunteers from this side of the room. 1, come on up. 2, come on up. 3, come on up. Stand over there, please. Face that direction. I need 6 volunteers on this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only got 5. Okay, 5. 5 up here. Actually, 5 back there. We're going to do this right. You are British soldiers. You are American colonists, farmers. You are not really trained soldiers. You just have been training to be militia, which are sort of like weekend warriors. Okay? Now, you are upset that the British soldiers are marching through. There is no war been started yet. The British soldiers are going out to capture some illegal weapons that the colonists have been hiding. In this village of Lexington, there's this open green space, sort of like the town center. And so the colonists come out to meet the soldiers and to stand up for their rights. So stand firm, you three. The soldiers come marching down the road. They line up on the green space facing the colonists. And the leader goes over to the colonists and says, "In the name of the king, back to your homes." The colonists are being stubborn. They say, "We have a right to be here. This is our land. We have a right to be here." The colonists are not planning on fighting. The soldiers are not planning on fighting. Both sides are being stubborn and trying to be really macho. The colonists are standing there, some of them old, some of them teenagers. They just want to say, "Hey, we're standing up for our rights. We can stand here. This is okay." British soldiers say, "Leave, disperse, go back to your homes. We don't want trouble." Then suddenly, a shot is heard. Oh, snap. A shot is heard. Nobody knows who fired. If it was a soldier whose gun went off without being told to fire, or if it was a colonist who was afraid and his gun went off prematurely, or if somebody over on the side, out in the trees, out in the rest of the city or town, fired. Nobody knows who fired first. But what happens when you hear, you all have your guns ready, you hear a gunshot? You automatically assume what? What? You automatically assume that the other person shot at you. So what do? Shoot back. And so they start shooting at each other. The leader of the soldiers, the British soldiers, are trying to make them stop because they never gave the order to fire. These guys over here, that most hunting they do is squirrel hunting or hunting for turkey. Most of them are being shot and killed. And then they start running away. And to this day, nobody knows who fired the first shot. But that accidental first shot was the first shot that started the Revolutionary War, which eventually led to our independence. Thank you, people. You can go sit down until I need some more volunteers, which will happen in a moment. So nobody knows who fired first. Now last year I had several students tell me that they watched a movie about this. There's a good book about this. It's called April Morning. And there's a movie that has this in it, where it has this guy hiding behind a fence, and he really wants them to start fighting because he doesn't like the British. And so he shoots first to get everybody to jump on the bandwagon and start firing. Anybody watch that movie in elementary school? April Morning? Okay. Has a lot of famous actors in it before you even realize that they were famous. Including, if you know Men in Black, guy called Rip Torn. He plays Zed. He plays Zed, the head of MIB, is in the movie, and you might actually see him. I have a video clip that I'll be playing either later on today or another day. But nobody knows who fired first. But it starts the Revolutionary War. This first shots at Lexington, it had a nickname. Anybody know the nickname for these? The shot heard around the world. Yes. That's Lexington, the Battle of Lexington, April 19, 1775. The first shots of the Revolutionary War. Now, you have to understand how people fought back then. Believe it or not, there are rules for war. There are rules for war. And what I would like to see happen is this. Here's how two armies would battle it out in this time period. These two rows, please come up here. This row, kneel down on one knee. This row, kneel down on one knee, facing that way. The other, behind, standing up, facing that way. These two rows. The same thing right here. This row kneeling down, the other row behind them standing up. This is the way wars and battles were fought back then. What would happen is basically they would fire. It would almost be like, but not exactly, there wasn't somebody that said 1, 2, 3, fire, but it was basically like that, where they would start firing at each other at the same time, and so shoot at each other on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and whoever is left standing after that fight wins the battle. You face each other just like this on an open field. Nothing in between you. Whoever has the most soldiers standing up at the end is the winner. Now, that might be because the other people are all dead. It might be because the other side ran away. That is how wars were fought back then. You face each other face to face on an open field and fire. Who does that favor? What kind of army does that favor? What kind of army? A big one. Whoever has more people, they're going to have more people left on the field when they're done. Exactly. And as somebody pointed out, is that going to favor the British or the Americans? The British are going to have more trained soldiers than the Americans. Remember, just like I pointed out that militia group, they're not real soldiers. They took their hunting guns. The soldiers, that's their job. They have the weapons, they have the training. And it's stand on an open field, fire. That's how they walk. That's how they fought. That's how you were expected to fight. If you did not fight like that, you weren't playing fair. Go back, sit down. You were not playing fair if you didn't fight like that. Two sides stand in an open area, an open field. That's why it was called a battlefield. Nowhere do you have a battle forest or a battle mountain. It is a battlefield because it's an open field. Two sides stand in the open area. Each side fires. Whoever survives wins. Those were the rules of the day. If the Americans follow those rules, what's going to happen? If the Americans follow those rules, what is going to happen, Victor? They're going to lose. Do they have any chance of winning if they follow those rules? No. Who made up those rules? Who do you think made up those rules? Yes. The British, yes. The people with the big armies made up the rules. But the colonists decided not to play by them. The colonial tactics were different. The colonies had their own tactics. They'd hide behind trees, jump out, shoot, and run away. Hit and run, as somebody said, right there up on the screen. Hit and run tactics. Now, imagine British soldiers. They are trained to march in a line, and they have these wonderful red uniforms with backpacks, and the backpacks are held on by these big white leather straps that form a nice X or a nice target on the front of them. They are trained to march in rows. They are trained to stand, meet an enemy, and fire. Do you think that they knew how to fight when somebody's doing this hit and run stuff? No, they're trained to march, stop, get in the line, aim, fire. Now as they're walking, they're being picked off, and they have no idea what to do. Do you think they're frightened? Yeah, they're frightened. Ladies and gentlemen, the colonists did not play by the rules. They did not play fair. The only reason why they had to play like that is because they had no way of winning otherwise. If they tried to play by the rules, they would lose. So they knew they had to change the rules. Ladies and gentlemen, you could call the way the colonists fought that word with a big T that's in the news all the time. Yeah, terrorism. The tactics that the colonists used instilled fear in the British soldiers. Terror. They did not play by the rules. They didn't play fair. Terrorists today don't play by the rules. Why not? Because if they tried to play by the rules, they would lose. The Irish terrorists didn't play by the rules because if they did, they would have lost. The colonists didn't play by the rules. They didn't play fair. Over a year after that first battle, the United States gets representatives together, and they're debating this. There are still a lot of people in the colonies that did not want independence. They said, okay, this is a misunderstanding. Let's just ask for representation in Parliament. Let's just get this thing figured out. We don't want to create a different country. We just want to get the situation fixed. Well, after a little over a year of this fighting, they decide it is beyond being fixed. So you get the Declaration of Independence. And who can tell me when the Declaration of Independence came into being? When was the Declaration of Independence? The day that the United States declared its independence. Day that they declared their independence. Day that they declared their independence. Got some more hands up. Good. You're catching on. July 4th. Was that your idea or listening to the people behind you whispering to you to give you the answer? Okay. July 4th, 1776. Bum 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 bum. July 4th, 1776. Now keep in mind, not everybody wanted independence. There were those loyalists that you read about. 20%. Or maybe even 33% of the colonists didn't want independence. They wanted to fix the situation, but they didn't want to leave Great Britain. The colonists that wanted independence they then resorted to terrorism against those loyalists, too. Many loyalists' houses were burned down. You've heard of tar and feathering people? And you think that that's a funny little thing? Oh, you got sticky stuff and they put feathers on you and you look like a chicken running around. In order to pour tar on somebody, tar has to be hot. Hot tar burns off your skin. Then you put the feathers on. And then tar hardens as it cools. And so it's stuck to your skin. And to get that off, you rip off your skin. So somebody that's tarred and feathered is not a funny thing. Cartoons make it look funny. It looks like a chicken. It's nasty. If you've ever messed with tar, tar is a really nasty thing. We colonists that wanted our independence did that to colonists that didn't want their independence. Another way, we used terrorism in the fight for independence. Okay, we got some help. We couldn't do this on our own. We didn't have factories to make all these weapons. We didn't have nearly enough troops to fight this war. Who is our biggest helper? What country was our biggest friend, helped us when we were down? As a result, they actually went into bankruptcy, and the leaders of their country got their heads chopped off. They sacrificed for us, and that was France, yes. France gave us soldiers, gave us supplies, gave us a navy to use. They brought their navy to help us. We didn't have a navy. Remember, we weren't even a country. We were part of Great Britain at the time. We didn't have soldiers. There were Polish engineers and generals that came over from Poland when Poland lost its independence. They came to help us. A guy designed West Point and the fortifications at Saratoga. You can visit his house in Philadelphia. We never paid him like we were supposed to. His name was Kosciuszko. There's another guy, Pulaski, who there are many counties and cities around the country named after him for his help in the Revolutionary War. We had trainers from Germany come to drill our troops, train our troops, to turn them into an army. And we really had two kinds of armies, so to speak. We had the George Washington Army, and the George Washington Army fought by the rules. Let's all line up on the battlefield. Whoever shoots and kills the most people wins. Anybody here ever see the movie The Patriot? The Patriot deals with this kind of fighting. George Washington was not a great general. He lost more battles than he won. And that's because he fought like the British fought, because he was originally a British soldier. Open field, line up, shoot, whoever has the most standing wins. The second kind of army were the militiamen, the militia armies, the armies that were made up of all the ordinary people with guns, hiding behind trees, hiding behind fences, shooting and running away. That's the kind of army that actually won this war for us. The war ends in 1783. That is when we get our independence, 1783. And it ends with a treaty. A treaty is a document or an agreement between two countries. It's called the Treaty of Paris. The war ends. We have our independence. Now we have to figure out how we're going to put this country together. We have to create a government, a system of laws, and how are we going to be governed? And to be honest, first time, we blew it big time. Our first government was a massive failure. Now we have the United States of America. How are we going to run it? Well, we're first going to try something called the Articles of Confederation. It was our first government. It was our very first government. And in this government, the states had all the power. The national government couldn't do anything. So under the Articles of Confederation, the states had all the power. There was no real president. Individual states could raise taxes. The government of the entire country could not. The government could declare war. The government was supposed to raise an army. The national government. The national government had no way to pay for that army. What happens when you go into war? Oftentimes you go into that short little word with a silent B in it. You go into debt. Well, the United States went into debt paying for this war. Now they have to pay back the people that gave them loans. Well, the government of the United States, the national government, couldn't raise any money. They did not have the power to raise taxes. So the only way they could get money to pay for supplies, to pay the soldiers who fought for them, was to go to every state and say, can you please give me some money? Can you please give me some money? Can you please give me some money? The states were greedy. They didn't want to give up any of their money. But the national government had no way of making money. Oh, and by the way, every state printed their own money. So money in Massachusetts was no good in Vermont. And every time, remember that free trade zone stuff that we talked about with the European Union? Every state had its own taxes as things entered it. So if you are in Massachusetts, you make something, you want to send it down to Maryland, it goes through New York. New York gets some of your money. It was like every state was an independent country. And it didn't work. It didn't work. It fell apart, and so we had to start over with our second government. That was the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution was created between 1787 and 1790. Some states jumped on board right away. Some states didn't. The U.S. Constitution is the law, or is the government that we have right now. In this government, both the national and the state governments share power. One is not more powerful than the other. The Constitution says, here is what the national government can do. And then it says at the very bottom, anything not specifically listed here as a power of the national government automatically belongs to the states. The Constitution specifically says national government can do this, can do this, can do this. And at the very end it says what isn't here written specifically for the national government automatically is a power of the states. So, just give you an example. What about speed limits? Speed limits for cars. Is that a national power or is that going to be a state power? Okay, I hear some people saying state. Why? Government doesn't control all the world. There's an even easier explanation for it. There weren't cars when the U.S. Constitution was written. So the U.S. Constitution wouldn't give the power to regulate speed limits to the national government because they didn't exist back then. So it automatically goes to the states. That's right. That's right. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and remember, an amendment is something added to a document. That was on your assignment for yesterday. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution have a special name. Anybody remember what the first 10 amendments to the Constitution was called? Margo? The Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights. And a bill in this situation just means a list. It doesn't mean that you have to pay for it. So we have our new government, and the government works, and the government is the same government that we have today. States and national government share power. And I'll end by saying we get into another war, 1812, and it's called, believe it or not, the War of 1812. And we're at war with Great Britain again. This time Great Britain comes in and they burn down Washington, D.C. And the most famous battle of the War of 1812 is the Battle of New Orleans, which happens after the war is done. Because they did not have phones, they did not have cell phones or telegraphs. The United States made peace with Great Britain, but it took so long for the message to get to the general in New Orleans that the battle took place anyway. And we won. And that general in New Orleans eventually becomes president. And I believe he's on what, the $20 bill? General Jackson. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very quick, very brief, not a lot of detail review of American history, how we became a country.